The woman came in off the eastern flat at mid-afternoon, when the light sits low and mean across the salt crust, and every shadow is the same copper color as the rock. I heard the gate sensor before I saw her, the low tone that means wait on the approach pad, not enough for a vehicle, maybe a person, maybe two. I was in the supply room checking the water reclaim output when the tone sounded. I pulled on my jacket, because desert wind at mid-afternoon cuts regardless of the season, and went out. She was 20 meters from the gate, walking. The girl was beside her, holding her hand. The woman was tall for a Velshurath, gray-silver skin the color of weathered iron, hair loose and sand-matted, wearing what had been a traveling coat before the desert took most of it. She was moving the way people move when moving is the only thing keeping them upright. The girl was smaller, 6 years, maybe 7, same silver-gray coloring, eyes that amber color that Velshurath carry in the sun, large and steady, and watching me with the particular attention of a child who has learned that what adults do in the next 30 seconds will determine something important. I opened the gate. "Come in," I said. I said it in standard and then in the 4 words of Velshurath I knew, which amounted to, "Inside, safe, water, sit." It turned out to be enough. The woman's name was Varath. The girl's name was Sen. I got the names in that order. The woman gave her own first, then the girl's, as if establishing a record. Which, I would come to understand, was exactly what she was doing. "I am Davin Kors. I have kept the way station at Velkith Reach Crossroads for 6 years. Before that I was a compact field medic for 14 years, 3 postings, 2 of them in desert-class environments. The way station is decommissioned, taken off the active route registry 4 years ago when the Northern Sand Corridor trade routes were consolidated, but the compact maintains a skeleton presence in decommissioned stations in case of medical emergency, and I am that skeleton. There is one building, a water reclaim array, a comm relay on the roof, and a storage unit that I have half converted to a recovery bay because in 6 years I have needed it 12 times. Mostly miners from the extraction operations 200 kilometers north, once a surveying team, twice travelers who miscalculated the flat crossing. I had never had a woman and a child walk in off the eastern gate before. I got them inside. I sat Sen at the table near the window. She accepted the seat without comment, settling with her hands in her lap, watching her mother, and I took Varath to the recovery bay. Heat assessment first. Her core temp was elevated but not critical. She had been walking in the desert heat for approximately 6 hours based on the dehydration markers and the sand on her coat, which was the fine particulate type that the eastern flat throws up in the afternoon thermals. She had drunk carefully. The water canteen on her belt was not empty, and she had kept herself and the child moving at the right pace to avoid complete collapse. She had done everything right, in other words, and had still arrived barely upright. I put in a fluid line, noted the intake, checked her hands and feet for exposure. She watched me work. "You are a medic," she said. It was not a question. 14 years, I said, before this. She looked at the recovery bay, the clean shelving, the intake log on the wall, the med kit mounted by the door, and something in her face settled. Not relief exactly, more like a decision confirmed. "I need to tell you something," she said. "You can tell me after you've had 2 hours of rest and another half-liter," I said. "No." She said it flatly, without heat, but with the particular quality of a person who has decided what the priorities are and is not negotiating the order. "Now, while I can still think clearly, because by tomorrow I may not be." I pulled the chair from the corner and sat down across from her and listened. Her husband's name was Reth Velkith. He was a secondary householder of House Velkith, a mineral consortium family, extraction operations across 4 moons in this sector, money and connections, and the specific kind of confidence that comes from both. They had been bonded 7 years. 2 children, Sen, 6, and Vel, her son, 14 months, currently at the home of a neighbor woman named Korath in the settlement of Kesorvath. 60 kilometers north, where Vareth had left him 4 days ago when Reth had told her they were taking a family trip to see the extraction sites. The family trip had ended here, on the eastern flat, yesterday morning. Reth had stopped the transport at the edge of the salt crust, where the road gives way to nothing but pale mineral expanse for 240 kilometers in the direction of the way station, and told Vareth and Sen to get out. He had handed Vareth the water canteen. He had not gotten out of the vehicle himself. He had said, "You are not coming back." Then he had driven north. Vareth had stood on the eastern flat with her 6-year-old daughter and watched the transport until she could not see it anymore. She said this without particular emotion, the kind of flatness that comes after the emotion has been used up. "I knew about the way station," she said. "I have known about this way station for 2 years. I looked it up when we first moved to the sector. In case." She paused. "I do not know what I thought I was preparing for, but I knew there was a medic here and I knew the distance. 240 kilometers with a 6-year-old and 1 water canteen. She had rationed it. She had walked mostly in the early morning and the late afternoon, resting during the worst of the midday. She had kept Sen calm by telling her they were walking to a safe place, which was true. "He will have filed papers already," she said. "This is why he put us out here, not to kill us. If he had wanted that, he would have driven farther from the way station, far enough that we could not have walked. He wanted us alive but absent. He needs us to not be present for the filing window." I asked her what the filing window meant. She told me about the Velshurath secondary house abandonment provision. Under Velshurath house law is codified through the compact bilateral accord, a bonded partner who abandons the household, who leaves without a registered welfare justification, forfeits custody rights in any subsequent claim. The filing window was 7 days from the date of departure. Reth had the paperwork ready. He would file that she had left voluntarily, taking Sen with her. He would file that Vel had been left in her care, and she had placed him with a neighbor without authorization, constituting abandonment of a minor. He would file all of this while we were in the desert, and she had no way to contest it. After the 7 days, custody would default to the household of record, which was his. She was not crying. She was thinking. She was in a fluid recovery bed in a decommissioned desert way station, and she was thinking through the problem. "How long," she said, "before a recovery team can reach here?" I had been doing the same calculation. The nearest Velkath Holdings operational site was 180 kilometers northwest. If Reth had already made contact, and based on the timeline he had, and if he had ordered a team to come for Sen, and if the team had standard transport. 8 days, I said, maybe 9. The northern access road is poor this time of year. She nodded. "The filing window closes on day 7. If I am not able to contest by then, the provisional custody order issues automatically. Once it issues, the recovery team is operating under a valid order. Contesting it after becomes a secondary proceeding, which takes months." She looked at her hands. "I do not have months. Vel is 14 months old. He is with Korath, who is a good woman, but she is not his mother, and she did not agree to keep him indefinitely." I thought about what she had said. I thought about the comm relay on the roof, and the 14 years I had spent in the field learning which codes applied to which situations, and the compact welfare manual I kept on the 3rd shelf of the supply room, because out here I was often the only person in range to make a determination. "The filing window," I said, 7 days from the date of departure, which was yesterday morning. "Yes." "Then we have 6 days. She looked at me. She had amber eyes, the same amber as Sen's, but with more gold in them, lit by the window light. There was something in them that was measuring me, not unkindly, the way you measure a piece of ground before you put your weight on it. "You know the compact welfare code," she said. 14 years in the field, I said. "You learn it. You have to. Out here there is no one else to call." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me what you can do." I told her. I want to be clear about something. I am not a lawyer. I am not a compact legal officer or a welfare specialist or a house arbitrator. I am a field medic who has kept a decommissioned way station for 6 years and has learned, out of sheer practical necessity, which sections of the compact welfare code apply to which emergencies. I have used that knowledge for injured miners and lost travelers and a surveying team that got into a contract dispute with their equipment supplier 200 kilometers from the nearest settlement. I have never used it like this. But I knew enough. The Velshorath abandonment provision required, under the bilateral accord with the compact, that the filing party establish a clean chain of departure. Voluntary departure of one's own will without coercion. If there was evidence of coercion, evidence that the departing party had been removed from the household involuntarily, the abandonment provision did not apply. The claim failed. Evidence of coercion could be established by a compact medical record. A field medic's formal intake documentation was admissible under Section 14 of the Bilateral Welfare Supplement, as primary evidence in any custody proceeding arising within the compact-registered territory covered by the medic's posting. This way station was compact-registered. I was the compact-posted medic. The intake documentation I had already started, Varath's name, the date, the medical assessment, the intake time, was already a legal record. What it needed was a formal statement of circumstances. Varath's account of what had happened, taken under medical intake protocol, documented in my hand, and transmitted to the compact welfare registry via the comm relay on the roof. If we did that, if we filed that account with the compact welfare registry before Reth filed the abandonment claim, or even concurrently with it, the 7-day filing window became contested territory. An active welfare record in the compact registry triggered an automatic review hold on any concurrent house law claim. The provisional custody order could not issue automatically. It would have to go to a review panel. And a review panel would read my documentation. And my documentation would include the medical record of a woman who had walked 240 kilometers across a desert with her 6-year-old child after being removed from a vehicle by her bonded partner. Desert exposure does not look like voluntary camping. The clinical markers are specific. I know them. I had documented them already, which meant they were already in the record, which meant they were going to be in whatever I transmitted. Varath listened to all of this without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You are certain of the Section 14 provision?" "I used it twice," I said. "A miner's compensation claim and a contract dispute, never a custody case. But the language of the section is broad. It covers any civil proceeding arising in compact territory, where the medic's intake documentation is directly relevant to establishing the facts of a welfare situation." "This is a welfare situation," she said. "You walked 240 kilometers across a desert with your daughter because your bonded partner put you out of a vehicle on the salt flats," I said. "Yes, I would say this is a welfare situation." Something happened in her face then, not the measurement anymore, something quieter. I did not try to name it. "All right," she said, "tell me how we start." We started that evening. I brought the portable intake terminal to the recovery bay, the one I use for formal medical documentation when I need to transmit to the regional health registry, and I sat across from Varath, and I took her statement. Her full name, her bonding registration number, her children's names and registered identifications. The date, the time, the location, Reth's vehicle, the edge of the eastern flat, the coordinates where he had stopped, which Varath had recorded on her personal comm unit before the battery died. The sequence of events, his words, what he had handed her, how long she had walked. I typed it as she spoke. I did not editorialize. I did not add my own language. I took down what she said, exactly as she said it, because that is what a medical intake statement is, the patient's account, recorded accurately, signed by the recording medic. When we were done, she read it through twice. Then she said, "Yes, that is accurate." I signed the document. I put my compact medic registration number in the authorization field. I formatted it for transmission under Section 14, and I sent it to the Compact Welfare Registry at 21:47 hours on the first night. The acknowledgement came back 11 minutes later, a registration number and a timestamp. The record was in the system. I sat on the roof for a while after that, watching the stars come out over the eastern flat. The salt crust catches starlight in a specific way, a low luminescence, almost like the flat is glowing from underneath. I have sat on this roof many times, and it is always the same, and it is always enough. Inside, Varath slept. Sen slept on the cot I had set up in the corner of the supply room. Before she slept, she had eaten 2 bowls of grain paste, the second one without being asked, which I took as a sign that she had decided I was safe, and she had looked at the equipment shelves with the methodical attention of a child who catalogs what is around her. She had asked me the name of the pressure injector on the second shelf. I told her. She repeated it carefully to herself, and looked at it for another moment, and then put it away in whatever internal file she was keeping. That was the first night. The second day, Varath was stronger. She ate, she moved around the building, she asked to use the comm relay to try to reach Korath. We got through on the third attempt. The northern relay chain is unreliable in sand season, and the connection was poor but sufficient. Korath's voice came through with the specific quality of a woman who has been worried for 4 days and is trying not to show it. Vel was safe. Vel was eating and sleeping normally. No one had come for him yet. "Keep him inside," Varath said. "Do not answer the door to anyone from House Velkith." "How long?" Korath asked. Varath looked at me. I held up 6 fingers, then changed it to 5. 5 days remaining in the filing window. 5 days, Varath said. "Maybe less." Korath said she understood. The line went out before Varath could say goodbye. She stood at the comm unit for a moment after the connection dropped. Then she said, "What else do we need to file?" What we needed was a challenge to the anticipated abandonment claim. Under the bilateral accord, a party with an active welfare record in the Compact Registry could file a preemptive objection to any concurrent House law claim that the welfare record made factually contested. The objection had to specify the claim it was preempting, the basis of the contest, and the relief requested. It had to be filed by the party directly or by an authorized representative. I was not an authorized legal representative, but I was the recording medic. And the recording medic, under Section 14, had standing to submit supplementary documentation relevant to the welfare record already on file. I spent the morning of the second day writing the supplementary documentation. It was not a legal brief. I am not a lawyer, and I did not write one. It was a medical narrative, a detailed account of the clinical presentation of a patient who had walked 240 kilometers across an arid environment, the markers I had observed and documented, and my medical assessment of what those markers indicated about the circumstances of her departure from the household. I have spent 14 years documenting what desert environments do to people. I know the difference between a person who chose to be in the desert and a person who was placed there without adequate preparation or consent. The clinical markers are not the same. I documented the difference. I submitted that documentation to the Compact Welfare Registry at 13:30 hours on the second day. Varath read it before I sent it. She read it once, quickly. Then she read it again, slowly. When she finished, she put the terminal down on the table and looked out the window at the eastern flat for a while. "You have done this before," she said. It was not exactly a question. "Not this," I said, "but similar." "You know the law well," she said. "I know enough of it," I said. "Enough to know what Section 14 was written for." She looked at me for a moment. "What was it written for?" "For situations," I said, where someone is far from any legal office and far from anyone who could help them, and the only person present is a medic. I paused. It was written for exactly this. She was quiet. Then she said, "My husband believed there was no one here who could help me." "Your husband had not checked," I said. She did not smile, but something in her face changed, in the specific way that faces change when a thing that was unbalanced begins to balance. Sen had been listening from the corner of the supply room. She had a section of copper wire from the maintenance supply box, and she was bending it into shapes, a systematic process, I had noticed, with each shape distinct from the last. She was watching us with the amber eyes that did not miss much. That afternoon, I showed her the pressure indicator on the water reclaim array. She wanted to know how it worked. I explained it. She listened with the specific attention of a child who is actually going to retain this, and when I finished, she asked me 2 follow-up questions that indicated she had followed the explanation correctly. I answered them. She went back to the copper wire, and I could see her working something out in her hands that corresponded to whatever she was thinking through in her head. She had not spoken much in 2 days. Not from fear. I had seen fear in children in the desert, and this was not it. It was more like she was being careful with her words, saving them for the things that mattered. I understood that. I had met adults who never learned it. On the 3rd evening she came and stood next to me at the roof access and said, "Is my brother safe?" "Your mother spoke to Korath today," I said. "Vel is fine, he is eating." She nodded once as if confirming a calculation. "My father will send people," she said. "I know," I said. "What will happen when they come?" I thought about how to answer this in a way that was honest and not frightening. "When they come," I said, "they will find that your mother has already filed documents with the Compact Welfare Registry, documents that contest any claim your father has made. Those documents mean that no custody order can be issued without a review panel looking at all of them first. The people your father sends will not have authority to take you anywhere without a valid order." She considered this, and if they try, then they are in violation of Compact Welfare Protocol, I said, "which is a serious matter. I have the comm relay. I can report a welfare protocol violation in real time." She looked at the comm relay antenna on the roof. She assessed it. "It works," she said. "I tested it this morning," I said. She nodded again. The same confirmation of calculation nod. She went back down the roof access ladder with the particular competence of a child who has decided to trust a piece of information and move on to the next problem. The 4th day brought a sand front from the northwest, not a major event, but enough to reduce visibility to 100 meters and shut down the eastern flat entirely. Good, in a way. Nothing was moving on the roads in this sector. The recovery team, wherever it was sitting somewhere waiting it out. I used the time. I went through the Compact Welfare Manual, the physical copy, 312 pages, which I have read completely twice and referred to countless times in 6 years. And I found 3 additional provisions that applied to Varath's situation. Section 22, which covered the evidentiary weight of medical documentation in bilateral house law proceedings. Section 41, which specified that a compact welfare record created within the first 48 hours of a reported welfare emergency carried enhanced procedural standing in any subsequent review. And a provision in the appendix, Annex 7C, which I had found once before in a minor's compensation case, and which I had thought about ever since. It specified that in any bilateral proceeding where a compact registered medic's documentation established prima facie evidence of involuntary displacement, the burden of proof in any concurrent house law claim shifted to the filing party. The burden of proof shifted. Reth would not be able to say she had left voluntarily and have that accepted as true unless he could prove it. With our record already in the system, he could not prove it. I brought this to Varath that afternoon. I explained the Annex 7C provision, what it meant, and what it would require Reth to do to overcome it. She listened. She asked 3 precise questions about the scope of the provision. I answered each one from the text. Then she said, "He cannot prove it." "No," I said, "he cannot. The clinical markers I documented are inconsistent with voluntary departure. He would need evidence that contradicts a compact medical record. He does not have that evidence because there is no such evidence, because it did not happen." She sat with that for a moment. The sand front was still moving outside, a low friction sound against the building's exterior, constant, like the desert breathing. "He was certain there was nothing I could do," she said. "He planned this carefully. He believed that if I were 240 kilometers from the nearest settlement, with no transport, no communications, no advocate, he believed that by the time I reached any of those things the window would have closed." "He did not account for the way station," I said. "He did not account for you," she said. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She said, "Why are you doing this?" I thought about the answer. "You came in off the eastern gate," I said. "You and your daughter, that is what the way station is for." She looked at me. "You could have given us water and a calm line and wished us well," she said. "You did not have to learn the law for us." "I already knew the law," I said. "Then you did not have to apply it." "Yes," I said, "I did." She looked at me for a long time. I am not a man who is easy to read. 14 years in the field tends to put a particular surface on a person, practical and spare. But she read me anyway, with the amber eyes that took their time and did not miss things. "All right," she said quietly. On the 5th morning the sand front cleared. The eastern flat was pale and still in the early light, the salt crust undisturbed. I went up to the roof to check the relay antenna. The sand gets into the connectors if you are not careful, and while I was up there I saw the dust on the northern access road. Far out. Maybe 40 kilometers, maybe 50. A transport, moving south. I came down and told Verith. She received it the way she had received everything, without visible alarm, with immediate practical assessment. "How long?" 3 hours, I said. "Maybe 4. The road is rough after the sand front." She nodded. She went a fine sen. I spent the next 2 hours going back over every document I had transmitted, each one in order, each one checked against the relevant provision, each one cross-referenced. I was looking for anything that could be challenged, anything that was unclear or imprecise. I found nothing. The record was complete. I had been careful. I also made 3 additional transmissions. The first was to the Compact Welfare Registry, flagging an anticipated in-person contact, with individuals acting on behalf of a party to the active welfare case, and requesting that any action taken by those individuals be logged against the welfare case reference number. The second was to the Regional Compact Corridor Authority, notifying them of an active welfare case at my way station and providing the case reference number. The third was to the Compact Outer Settlement Medical Authority, my supervising body, informing them of the situation and my actions, and asking them to note this in my duty log. These transmissions did not change anything legally. But they meant that, when the transport arrived, it was arriving at a place where multiple compact bodies had been notified that something was happening here. It is harder to act outside a proper process when there are that many eyes already on the record. Sen found me checking the antenna connections for the 3rd time. "They are coming," she said. "Yes," I said. She stood beside me, looking north. The dust on the road was closer now. I could see the transport more clearly, a standard Velketh Holdings utility vehicle, 2 people visible through the windshield. "What do we do?" she said. "We wait," I said, "and when they arrive I talk to them." She thought about this. "What do I do?" "You stay near your mother," I said. "And you do not go near their vehicle." She looked at the transport, then she looked at me. "And if they say I have to?" "Tell them to produce the custody order," I said. a valid order issued by a compact review panel. If they cannot produce it, they have no authority to take you anywhere. She stored this. I could see her storing it, the specific quality of a child processing a piece of information that she is going to need. And if they have one, she said. They do not have one, I said. We would have been notified. The review panel notifies all parties. We have not been notified. She nodded, the confirmation nod. Then she went back inside. I stayed on the roof and watched the transport come in. There were two of them. A Velkith Holdings operations coordinator, a tall Velshurath male, copper-gray skin, close-cropped white hair, the particular bearing of a man who handles administrative problems for a family with money, and a younger one, a transportation specialist, who stayed by the vehicle and did not speak. The coordinator's name, he told me at the gate, was Vel Korath. He was polite. He was the kind of polite that sits on top of the confidence that the outcome is already determined. I am here on behalf of House Velkith, he said, to take custody of the minor child Sen Velkith, pending the resolution of a house custody proceeding. I understand, I said. Can you show me the custody order? He blinked just once. A provisional order is pending issuance, he said. The filing window closes in 2 days. The filing window closed some time ago as a practical matter, I said. There is an active welfare record in the Compact Welfare Registry, established at 21:47 hours 4 nights ago. Case reference number. I read it from the terminal I was carrying. KVR 291 CORSD under Section 41 of the Bilateral Welfare Supplement. A welfare record established within 48 hours of a reported welfare emergency carries enhanced procedural standing. Under Annex 7C, the burden of proof in any concurrent House law proceeding has shifted to the filing party. There is no provisional order in existence because no provisional order can issue while an active welfare case is under review. He was quiet for a moment, the particular quiet of a man revising his understanding of a situation. I was not informed of a welfare filing, he said. The notification would have been sent to House Velkith's registered compact correspondence address, I said, 4 days ago, and again yesterday morning when I submitted supplementary documentation, and again this morning when I notified the Compact Welfare Registry of your anticipated arrival. Another pause. You anticipated our arrival. Your principal placed a woman and her child on the Eastern Flat 4 days ago, I said. I calculated the travel time from the nearest Velkith Holdings operational site. Yes, I anticipated your arrival. Velkorath looked at me for a long moment. He was doing his own calculations, I could see, running through what he had been told, what he had been sent to do, and what the situation actually was. He was not a stupid man. He was arriving at the same conclusion a not stupid man would arrive at. I will need to contact House Velkith, he said. Of course, I said. I can offer you the use of the Waystation comm relay. I will note the contact in the welfare case log. He absorbed that. You will note it. Everything that happens here today goes into the welfare case record, I said. That is standard procedure when an active welfare case is in progress. He looked at the building behind me, at the antenna on the roof, at me. House Velkith will want to contest this filing, he said. House Velkith is entitled to contest the filing, I said. The review panel process allows for that. The panel will assess all submitted documentation. I have submitted the intake record, the medical assessment, a detailed clinical narrative documenting the physical presentation of a patient who walked 240 kilometers across an arid desert environment, the patient's formal statement of circumstances, and 3 supplementary filings citing specific bilateral accord provisions. House Velkith is welcome to submit whatever documentation it believes addresses those materials. I paused. I am, of course, available as a witness, I said, if the panel requires one. The quiet stretched. The young transportation specialist by the vehicle was looking at the eastern flat. The salt crust was white in the midday light, wide and still. "I will make my call," Velkorath said. "The relay is through the door on your left," I said. He was in the building for 40 minutes. Vareth and Sen and I sat in the supply room. Vareth had her hands flat on the table, still, deliberate. Sen had the copper wire. She was making something that had begun to look like a map. I did not try to listen to the call. I did not need to. When Velkorath came back out, he found me at the gate with the terminal. He was carrying himself differently, not defeated exactly, but recalibrated. The confidence that the outcome was already determined had been replaced by something more careful. "House Velkorath will be engaging the review panel process," he said. "That is their right," I said. "We will be departing," he said. "I will note the departure time in the welfare case log," I said. He looked at me for the last time. He was trying to find something in my face, what exactly I was, what made a compact desert station medic the problem he had evidently become. I don't know what he found. "Good afternoon," he said. "Safe travel," I said. I watched the transport go back up the northern access road until the dust was gone. Then I went inside. Vareth was standing in the middle of the supply room. Sen had set down the copper wire and was watching the door. I said, "They're gone." Vareth breathed out. Not a collapse, more like setting down something she had been carrying at arm's length for a long time. Sen said, "Did they have the order?" "No," I said. She nodded, the confirmation nod. Then she picked up the copper wire and went back to work. We spent the next day transmitting the remaining documentation. The welfare case was still active. It would remain active until the review panel convened and issued a determination, which would take weeks. But the immediate crisis was over. The provisional order had not issued. Velkorath and his transportation specialist had driven back north with nothing they had come for. I helped Vareth draft the formal challenge to the anticipated abandonment claim. She knew what she wanted to say. I knew how to say it in the language the panel would accept. We worked through it together at the table in the supply room, Vareth speaking and me finding the provisions that supported each point and her reviewing them, and sometimes correcting my reading of the Velkorath terminology, which I was not always getting right. Sen sat in the corner with the copper wire. By the end of the afternoon she had made something that was unmistakably a map of the way station, the building, the gate, the water reclaim array, the antenna. She put it on the table without comment when we took a break for grain paste. I looked at it for a while. "That's accurate," I said. "I walked all of it," she said simply. We transmitted the challenge at 1800 hours. The registry acknowledgement came back in 9 minutes. Case updated. Review panel convening date to be determined within 30 days. On the 7th morning, the last day of the original filing window, had there been one, I arranged transport for Vareth and Sen with the compact regional coordinator, who maintains a shuttle route through the outer settlements on a regular schedule. The shuttle would take them to Kesorvath. Vareth would collect Vel from Korath. She had already arranged temporary housing through the Compact Resettlement Assistance Program, which I had found in the appendix of the manual at 200 on the 4th night. Before the shuttle came, Sen returned the copper wire map to the supply room shelf she had taken the wire from. She put it in the same position, rolled into the same coil. Then she came to find me. "Will you be at the panel?" she said. "If they call me," I said, "I will be." She considered this. "I think they will call you," she said. "I think so too," I said. She nodded. Then she said, "The pressure indicator on the water reclaim array, it is at 86%. "I know," I said. "I checked this morning." 86 is good. 86 is good, I said. 80 is when I start paying attention. 75 is when I call the maintenance team. She stored this with the same attention she had given the original explanation. Then she said, Thank you for letting me learn it. I did not know what to say, so I said, thank you for wanting to. She went to find her mother. The shuttle came at 9:40. Vareth and Sen came out with nothing. There had been nothing to come with, and Vareth stopped at the gate and looked at me. The panel process, she said. What are the odds? Good, I said. The documentation is thorough. The clinical record is clear. Annex 7C shifted the burden. He will have to prove something he cannot prove. She nodded. She was not looking for reassurance. She was asking a professional question, and she accepted a professional answer. And if the panel needs your testimony, she said. Send the date and I will be there, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The eastern flat was pale and still behind her, the same pale and still it always is in the morning, before the light gets mean. He thought he had put me somewhere I could not fight from, she said. He was wrong. Yes, I said. Because you were here. Because you walked here, I said, 240 kilometers, with your daughter, because you knew about the way station and you came to it. I paused. I was just the person who was already here. She looked at me for another moment. Then she turned and walked to the shuttle. Sen was already at the door. She stopped and looked back at me with the amber eyes that do not miss much. She raised her hand in a small, precise gesture. Not a wave, something more deliberate than a wave. An acknowledgement, I thought. A filing in whatever record she kept. I raised mine in return. The shuttle door closed. The shuttle lifted and went north, and I watched it until it was a point of light against the morning sky, and then until it was nothing at all. I went back inside and checked the pressure indicator on the water reclaim array. 86%. I noted it in the maintenance log with the date and the time. Then I sat down at the table where we had built the welfare challenge, where Sen had made her map out of copper wire, and I opened the comm relay terminal and made sure all the case transmissions were correctly archived. They were. I closed the terminal. I looked at the eastern gate, which was closed the way it always is in the morning, the way it was closed the morning before she came, and the morning before that, going back 6 years. She had walked 240 kilometers across a desert because she knew there was a way station here, because she had looked it up 2 years ago against a possibility she had hoped would not come. She had been right to look it up. She had been right to walk. That was the whole thing, really. She had been right to walk. I got up and went to check the gate sensor, which had been throwing a false positive reading in the sand season. It needed calibrating. I calibrated it. I noted the calibration in the maintenance log. In the morning, the eastern flat was quiet and white, and 45 days later, the review panel called me as a witness, and I went. And Reth Velketh's abandonment claim was dismissed in full. But that is another story. This one ends with a gate sensor calibrated, and a pressure indicator at 86%, and a small piece of copper wire coiled on the third shelf of the supply room, which I have not moved. I want to say something about what those 6 days were, because the record I kept was a legal record, and legal records are precise and spare by design. They do not say what it is like to keep a decommissioned way station in a desert sector on an outer rim moon for 6 years. They do not say what it is like to spend most of your days alone with the maintenance log and the comm relay, and the sound the salt crust makes at night when the temperature drops, which is a low, settling sound like the ground is putting itself to bed. I do not mind the solitude. I want to be clear about that. I chose this posting and I have kept it. But there is a specific quality to a building that has been lived in by more than one person for a week, even a week of crisis, that is different from a building lived in by one. The supply room, after Sen had spent 3 days cataloging it with her amber eyes and her copper wire and her systematic attention, felt different from the supply room I had come back to every evening for 6 years. The recovery bay, after Vareth had sat in it with her flat hands and her precise questions, felt different. Even the roof, where I had sat on 100 evenings watching the stars come out over the eastern flat, felt different the evening after the shuttle took them north. Not empty, not more empty than before. Just, specifically not occupied by two particular people, which is a different thing from simply unoccupied. I thought about the filing window and what it had been designed to do. 7 days. A woman 240 kilometers from the nearest settlement with no transport and no communications. The arithmetic of it was clean. He had done the arithmetic. What he had not done, what he could not have done, because it was the specific kind of thing you do not know until you know it, was account for what 6 years of field medicine produces in a person. The knowledge accumulates differently than it does in an office. In an office you learn what the law says. In the field you learn what the law means. You learn it because people come to you in the desert hurt, lost, without standing, without advocates, without anyone between them and whatever has happened to them except the fact that you are there, and you have to know what to do. You have to know which section applies to which emergency. You have to know that Annex 7C exists and what it says and why it was written. Because if you do not know it, no one will. Vareth had known there was a way station here. She had looked it up 2 years ago. I do not know what she thought she was preparing for, she had said. But she had looked it up. She had done the arithmetic of survival before the crisis came, in the quiet part of 2 years ago when nothing had gone wrong yet and she had wanted to know what was out there. That is a kind of intelligence I have seen before in the desert. The kind that maps the territory before it needs the map. Sen had it too, the copper wire map on the table, the systematic cataloging of the supply room shelves, the questions about the pressure indicator. She had been in the way station for 3 days when she needed to know that information, and she had learned it anyway, because it was there to be learned, and because she was the kind of person who learns what is there. I noted this in the welfare case record. Not in those terms, legal records are not philosophical documents, but in the clinical observation section of the intake notes, I noted that the patient had demonstrated exceptional situational judgment in managing a severe environmental emergency, and that the minor child had throughout remained calm, oriented, and cognitively engaged. I noted it because it was true, and because the review panel would read it, and I wanted them to know what kind of people they were adjudicating for. The case reference number is KVR291CORSD. If you look it up in the Compact Welfare Registry, which is a public record after the panel determination, you will find the full documentation. Every transmission timestamped. The intake record, the clinical narrative, the formal statement of circumstances, the supplementary filings, the challenge to the anticipated abandonment claim, the notification of Vel Korath's arrival and departure. 41 separate documents, all produced in 6 days in a decommissioned way station on the eastern flat of Velkoth Reach. The panel met 5 weeks later. I took the transport north and then the connector shuttle to the review office. Vareth was there when I arrived, in the same precise way she had been in the recovery bay, flat hands on the table, fully present, already working. Vel was with Korath in the waiting area. He was 14 months old and he had his mother's iron-colored eyes, and he was methodically disassembling and reassembling a soft-sided container from the carry bag, which was all I had to know about what kind of person he was going to be. Sen sat beside her mother. She was wearing a clean coat which was different from the sand-matted traveling coat I had first seen her in, but she had the same bearing, the particular economy of a child who does not waste attention or movement. When I came in, she looked at me with the amber eyes and gave me the small, precise gesture again. The acknowledgement. I returned it. The proceeding took 3 hours. I will not detail the legal substance of it. That is in the record, which is a public document, except to say that Reth Velkoth's representative arrived with documentation attempting to characterize Vareth's departure as voluntary, citing the absence of a reported welfare emergency in the days prior to the departure date. The panel chair asked the representative to address the Annex 7C provision and the burden of proof it established. The representative had 3 responses to this question, all of which I found in the clinical narrative I had already submitted. The panel chair thanked the representative for his submissions. My testimony took 38 minutes. I was asked about the clinical presentation. I described it in clinical terms, with the reference to the specific markers I had documented. I was asked about the medical assessment. I described it. I was asked whether, in my medical judgment, the clinical presentation was consistent with voluntary departure from a household. I said no. I said it was consistent with involuntary displacement into an arid environment following removal from a transport vehicle at the edge of a salt flat. The panel chair asked me if I was certain. I said I was a field medic with 14 years of experience in desert-class environments. I said I had documented the presentation in real time with full clinical precision. I said that in 14 years I had never documented this presentation in a person who had chosen to be in the desert. The panel chair thanked me for my testimony. The determination came out 6 days after the panel. The abandonment claim was dismissed. Provisional custody defaulted to Vareth pending a standard House law review. The case was referred to the Compact Bilateral Welfare Authority for a formal finding on whether Reth Velketh's conduct constituted a violation of bilateral accord protections, which is a separate proceeding and not my business to follow. The case reference number is in the public record. The copper wire map is on the 3rd shelf of the supply room at the way station at Velketh Reach. The pressure indicator on the water reclaim array is at 83% this morning, which means I will check it again tomorrow. The eastern flat is what it always is, pale and still. The kind of thing that does not change regardless of what happens on it or near it or because of crossing it. But someone crossed it, 2 people, with 1 water canteen and the knowledge that there was a way station at the other end. That is what I think about on the evenings when I sit on the roof and watch the stars come out. She had been right to walk.